99.7 WTN. Yes, indeed, Dan Mandis here. Along with Ken Weaver, News, John DeBee producing, and State Senator Jack Johnson, Republican leader as well, joining us on the Newsmaker line. Senator, how are you?
Good, Dan. Good morning. Good to be with you.
Yes, sir. Now, lots going on with you folks at the Tennessee General Assembly back in Nashville tomorrow for the start of the 2022 General Session. There's lots that you guys have in store. I feel like, Jack, we've been doing this for years now. Me and you doing the big preview. One task that you folks are going to talk about is, once again, changing the COVID-19 protocols. Now, I know that we had the big special session months ago now, I guess it's been. So is there anything left to discuss from a COVID-19 protocol standpoint?
Well, Dan, most of that is in the courts. As you know, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments and will be making some key decisions on that. But certainly it will be a topic of conversation for those of us at the state level and the General Assembly. We will continue to try to fight and look for ways to protect Tennesseans against the unconstitutional and unlawful mandates from the Biden administration.
I know that there was a lot of the COVID stuff was buttoned up in that special session. It is going through the courts now. There was one lingering question that needed clarifying about when a COVID-19 patient can have visitors. So if I remember right, and you don't have to, remind me of all this, Senator, but there was a conversation about when they can receive visitors and who. If someone was near the end of life, they could get visitors, but the current wording actually says anyone can get visitors. Is that something that needs to be clarified?
We have had some conversations with some of our hospital people and other healthcare providers with some concerns about the specific language that we passed, and certainly we're willing to go back and revisit that if we need to. But fundamentally, we will not change our position, and that is if a person is nearing the end of life, if it's likely that they will succumb to their COVID complications, then they certainly should be able to have a loved one with them in those final moments. And so we won't back up from that. But if we need to clean up some of the language in terms of how it's actually worded in the statute, we can take a look at that.
One of the biggest things that you'll be discussing as well, making big headlines obviously across the country, is redistricting. Now, we do this every 10 years, and everybody always screams about it, but the fact is, this is what we do. Do you have any early impressions as to what this is going to look like? I know that we don't always like to get political. Well, I always like to get political, but you maybe not so much. But do you know which side, if you will, which side this might benefit, the redistricting?
Well, it's been a fascinating process, and you're right, Dan. And just from historical context, obviously Democrats controlled the state of Tennessee for over 100 years. And Republicans actually took control in the early 2000s. And so Republicans have actually only redistricted within the last 150 years only once. And that was after the 2010 census. And we did the process back then. And so we're in the process of doing it again now. What's fascinating about it is, and it's not political, it's just geography, it's just demographics, is the tremendous growth we have experienced in Middle Tennessee relative to East and West. And so what you're seeing is compression towards Middle Tennessee, because all of our districts, be it State House, State Senate, and Congressional, those are the three lines that we draw at the state level. Your local governments will do school board, county commission, city council, so forth. But at the state level, we've had so much growth in Middle Tennessee that the geographic nature of each district is having to shift towards Middle Tennessee because they're all based on population. And so it's been a bit of a challenge in terms of, who it helps. We have said from the get-go, and we said this 10 years ago as well, we as Republicans will as the majority party, will draw these lines fairly and legally. And Tennessee is an overwhelmingly Republican conservative state. We don't have to play games or monkey business. We're going to draw the lines fairly and legally. And we've been working on that. We've been accepting public comment for a number of weeks now. And I think you'll start to see something become public within the next couple of weeks.
One other topic, well, actually several I have for you. A big discussion, of course, though, is school funding and revising the formula for how schools are funded. Now, a lot of folks have said this does need to be explored. They say it's outdated, doesn't treat all the districts the same. We even have Governor Lee saying a few weeks ago that we fund systems and not students, and that needs to change. He's all for making some changes. So talk about the changes or the options that some say are necessary and the process by which you go about deciding which districts get how much money.
Great question, Dan, and it is a very complicated process. We have what's referred to as the BEP. It's the Basic Education Plan, and it is a formula that we use and have used for decades to determine how much money is appropriated to a school district from the state. Now, statewide, on average, the funding for a child's K through 12 education, roughly 2/3 of that comes from state dollars, 1/3 comes from local dollars. Now, that's the average, and it does vary widely. In Williamson County, that I represent, I think it's quite unfair, actually, because over 55% of the dollars to fund a child's education come from local governments. Only 45% come from the state. And again, the state average is 2/3 comes from the state. You have other districts, say a small rural district, where over 90% of the funding comes from the state, less than 10 comes from local governments. Now, there will be disparity there based on demographics, no argument there. But there is such a wide range, and quite frankly, I believe unfairness in terms of how the formula works, and it has changed. You hit the nail on the head. It is outdated, and there are things that are in place now that were not contemplated when this formula was first developed. Now, to further complicate things, there is pending litigation. Every school system in the state has signed on to a lawsuit against the state of Tennessee, state government, over the BEP formula. So fortunately, we're in a financial position as a state where we can take a hard look at this funding mechanism and revise the formula. Governor Lee called for a number of committees to meet with stakeholders made up of teachers and educators and principals and school board members and county commissioners from across the state and other stakeholders, including legislators. And those committees have been meeting for several weeks now. And so I do think we're going to take a hard look at that BEP formula. It's a very complicated formula, and a lot of people have a lot of interest in it, but it does need to be revised.
State Senator Jack Johnson joining us. Senator, I have two more questions for you. One is about revenue, and one is about getting rid of voting machines. So I'm going to ask you to hold. We've got a check traffic. Senator Jack Johnson joining us on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We had one lawmaker a few weeks ago, Senator Bruce Griffey, suggesting that we get rid of voting machines and go back to paper ballots. It would also allow poll watchers and a few other things. I mean, I know that this is yet to be debated, but do you have any initial thoughts on this?
Well, I certainly think that we need to get rid of certain types of voting machines, including those made by a company called Dominion, made very famous back during the 2020 elections. And we have a couple of counties in Tennessee. I'm sad to say that Williamson County is one of those that use Dominion voting machines. I will be filing legislation later this week or early next week to require that those machines be replaced. And we obviously have an election year coming up this year, and I don't think we could practically get the machines replaced by the upcoming May election, which is the next election we'll have for the county primaries, local government primaries. But I'm going to file legislation to put systems into place to help protect the integrity of elections in Williamson County, because we do have Dominion voting machines, and I believe that they, as a company, have become tainted. Whether you believe that there was fraud or not committed using those machines, the way they have comported themselves in the wake of the 2020 elections is absolutely unacceptable, in my view, and the way they have fought cooperation in Arizona, Pennsylvania, and other states that use the machines. Now, regarding going to all paper ballots, you'll get mixed emotions about that from election experts. Paper ballots are pretty easy to be tampered with and can have fraud perpetrated with them as well. I'm open to any and all ideas. I think that in the wake of the 2020 elections and some of the controversy, which, by the way, We didn't really have any in Tennessee, thankfully. I'm very confident in the quality of our elections in Tennessee. But it did open people's eyes into the potential for fraud, and we've got to be very, very diligent in preventing that from happening.
Okay, last question. I know that, of course, 2019 and 2020, 2021, especially 2020, 2021, very difficult regarding COVID, lockdowns, and the like. Talk about the revenue that came into Nashville and coming into the state of Tennessee last couple of years, and how does that revenue, because from what I understand, it was pretty good, especially considering everything that happened. Heading into 2022, how does that affect what you're discussing as far as the budget goes coming into this legislative session that begins tomorrow?
Yeah, Dan, well, first of all, pre-COVID, leading up before the pandemic, Tennessee was in the best economic shape it's ever been in 2017, 2018, 2019, because we just continue to demonstrate, I believe, in Tennessee that conservative principles work. By that, I mean we cut taxes, we create a favorable business climate, and you have a strong economy, and your revenues go up. Keep in mind, Dan, we're one of the 3 or 4 least taxed states in the nation, meaning your tax liability as a Tennessean from state government is among the lowest in the entire nation. We are, in fact, the least indebted state in the entire nation. We have virtually no debt in Tennessee. Yet our revenues continue to go up, and that's because of a number of things. Number one, companies are moving here, people are moving here, there's economic activity going on. Yes, we did take a hit in COVID, but it was not nearly as bad as some of the other states like California, Illinois, New York, whose economies were in not nearly as strong a shape as ours. So it's like the old adage, you want to be the last to get sick and then the first to get well, and that's pretty much what happened with us as a state from a fiscal standpoint relative to the pandemic. We did take a hit economically, but it was much less severe than we thought it would be or it could have been or that it was in other states. And I think we were one of the first states to rebound. And because we were very conservative going through that, we cut our budget way back. We exceeded revenue collections. It's put our state in a tremendously healthy fiscal position. We have more revenue than we had anticipated. We have surpluses. And so what do you do with surpluses? Well, you can save it, give it back to taxpayers, and then fund critical things that need to be funded, such as the BEP formula, as I discussed earlier. You know, for capital projects like office buildings and things like that, it used to be you would bond those and you'd amortize them over a 20-year period of time. Not anymore. We pay cash. We write a check for it. So Tennessee's in a tremendously strong fiscal condition that creates 2 opportunities. Number one, to preserve that and make the most of that revenue, giving it back to taxpayers, putting it in your savings account, and funding critical things that need to be funded. And those are the 3 things we'll do.
In our final moments here, is there anything else that we haven't covered that's going to be on the docket that we need to know about?
Well, just thank you, Dan, to you and everyone at 99.7. You guys do such a great job of covering what's taking place in the General Assembly. It's very important. I encourage everybody listening to keep your eyes and ears open, be in touch with your state senators, your state representatives about things that are important to you. We don't meet year-round like they do in Washington and in some states. We get up there for about 3 to 4 months and get the state's business done, and then we go back home to our families and our jobs. So thanks to 99.7 and everyone there for covering what we do. And to all the listeners, make sure you're in touch with your state legislators.
All right. State Senator Jack Johnson, have a great day. Have a great week. Good luck in the upcoming session.